The morning began the same way it always did in Clearwater, a small town wrapped in a blanket of clouds that never seemed to lift. The streets glistened with the leftovers of last night's rain, and the smell of wet asphalt blended with the aroma of brewing coffee that drifted from the corner diner. A red neon sign buzzed faintly in the misty dawn, its light flickering over puddles that mirrored the gray sky. Inside, the world was waking up. The hiss of the griddle, the low hum of a jukebox that hadn't worked right in years, and the shuffle of boots against linoleum. These sounds wove together into the sleepy heartbeat of the town. Behind the counter, Mia moved quietly but with purpose. Her brown hair was tied back in a ponytail that brushed the collar of her faded blue uniform. The edges of her apron were frayed, the soles of her shoes nearly smooth from years of wear. Yet she moved as though every gesture had meaning. She poured coffee, wiped counters, and set out forks and napkins with the precision of someone who understood that small acts of care could make a long day feel shorter. Clearwater wasn't the kind of place where dreams bloomed easily, but Mia had learned to find beauty in the ordinary. The smell of toast, the clink of cups, the way sunlight spilled through the diner's old blinds. By 7, the regulars began to arrive, truck drivers grabbing breakfast before the long haul, old couples who'd been coming for 30 years, and teenagers half awake on their way to school. The rhythm was familiar. But every morning at exactly 8:10, the doorbell above the glass door chimed, and the day took on a different color. That was when Mr. Harris came in. He always wore the same gray overcoat, buttoned neatly up to his chest, a brown hat tilted slightly to one side, and a scarf tucked close to his throat. He moved slowly, carefully, as if he were walking through a memory. His face, mapped with deep lines, carried both weariness and wisdom. Without a word, he would make his way to the booth by the window, the one that caught the soft morning light and looked out over Main Street. Mia always noticed how his eyes lingered on the world outside, as though searching for something long lost. His order never changed. Black coffee, 2 slices of toast, and scrambled eggs. No salt, no pepper. The other waitresses barely looked at him anymore. He'd become part of the scenery, like the faded menu boards or the squeaky stool at the counter. But to Mia, there was something about him. Something fragile yet enduring. Maybe it was the way his hands trembled slightly when he lifted his cup, or the quiet sadness behind his smile. She started paying attention to him in small ways. A refill before he asked, a gentle, "Good morning, Mr. Harris," spoken like it actually mattered. He rarely said much in return, but she could tell he noticed. Sometimes, when she caught his gaze, there was a faint glimmer there, like a spark of light in an old lantern that refused to go out. One morning, after a slow breakfast rush, Mia brought him a small piece of apple pie from the counter. "On the house," she said, pretending not to care, though her heart fluttered nervously. He looked at the pie, then at her. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "I know," she replied, smiling, "but I wanted to." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, he picked up his fork. "You remind me of my wife," he said finally, eyes distant. "She used to do little things like this. Said the world was hard enough without kindness costing extra." Mia didn't know what to say, so she just smiled again, quietly tucking that sentence into her heart. From then on, a silent bond grew between them. Every morning before 8:10, she made sure his booth was wiped clean, his coffee freshly brewed, and his toast still warm. He began to tell her bits of his life. Not all at once, but in fragments. He'd been a teacher once, back when the schoolhouse still had chalkboards and the smell of new books. He'd married young, loved deeply, and lost quietly. His wife, Clara, had passed away 10 years ago. His children had moved far away, too far, it seemed, to remember to call. Now his days were measured in quiet rituals: breakfast at the diner, a walk through the park, evenings with old books and older memories. Mia listened like his stories were pieces of something sacred. She knew what loneliness felt like. Her own life wasn't easy. Her mother's illness had worsened that year, lungs failing, bills piling up faster than she could pay them. Mia worked 2 jobs and studied nursing at night, her dreams fueled more by necessity than ambition. There were nights when she'd sit beside her mother's bed, watching the rise and fall of her chest, wondering if hope was something people could run out of. But every morning, when she stepped into the diner and saw Mr. Harris waiting, something inside her steadied. Kindness, she realized, wasn't just something she gave. It was something that kept her alive, too. Winter came early that year. By December, Clearwater was buried in white. The diner windows fogged up from the heat inside, and snowflakes pressed against the glass like curious children. On one of those mornings, 8:10 came and went, but the bell above the door stayed silent. Mia looked up from the counter, frowning. The booth by the window remained empty. She told herself maybe the snow kept him home. But when the second morning passed the same way, a heavy unease settled over her chest. By the third morning, she couldn't take it anymore. Between orders, she called the local hospital. When the nurse confirmed that a Herbert Harris had been admitted after a fall, Mia didn't think twice. She borrowed her co-worker's coat and walked through the snow to the hospital. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she stepped into his room. He looked smaller somehow, pale against the white sheets, his hat resting on the chair beside him. His eyes flickered open when she spoke his name. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered weakly. "Of course I should," she said, placing a small paper bag on the bedside table. "I brought your favorite, black coffee and a muffin." For a moment, he stared at the bag as though it were a priceless gift. Then slowly he smiled, a real smile, soft and trembling. "You remind me of the daughter I wish I'd had," he said. From that day forward, Mia visited whenever she could, before work, after class, sometimes just for a few minutes. The nurses began to whisper about her, the waitress who visited an old man as if he were family. She read him stories from old books, brought him small flowers, and sometimes just sat quietly, holding his hand while he drifted in and out of sleep. Slowly, his color returned, and when he was finally well enough to leave, it was Mia who walked beside him as he made his careful way back into the diner. The regulars greeted him politely, but it was Mia's welcome home that made his eyes shine. "You know," he said as she set down his plate, "you make this place feel like home." The weeks that followed were peaceful. Spring began to whisper through Clearwater again. The snow melted into streams along the gutters, and the diner filled once more with the hum of normal life. Mr. Harris was back at his booth every morning, and Mia fell easily into their familiar rhythm. He told her stories about his wife's garden, about the students who'd brought him apples, about the sound of laughter in classrooms long gone. And she told him about her mother's slow recovery, her hopes of finishing nursing school, and the little moments that made her believe in better days. He never gave advice, just listened, his gaze steady and kind. For the first time in years, Mia didn't feel alone. Then, one rainy morning in early May, the diner's bell rang differently. It wasn't 8:10 yet. Mia was pouring coffee when she heard the sound, sharp, deliberate, heavy. 4 men in black suits walked through the door, their shoes slick with rain. The chatter in the diner died instantly. Behind them came 2 lawyers, their expressions grave. The tallest man stepped forward. "Are you Mia?" he asked. The room seemed to shrink around her. "Yes," she said hesitantly. "Is something wrong?" The lawyer nodded solemnly. "We represent Mr. Herbert Harris." Her breath caught. "Mr. Harris?" The lawyer's eyes softened. "I'm very sorry to inform you. He passed away last week." The words didn't register at first. The sound of the diner, the rain, the soft hiss of the grill, all faded to nothing. He passed away?" she whispered. The lawyer nodded again, pulling a sealed envelope from his briefcase. "He asked that we deliver this to you personally." Mia's hands trembled as she took it. The paper was thick, the seal unbroken, her name written carefully across the front. The sight of it made her chest ache. She tore it open slowly. Inside was a letter, written in Mr. Harris's careful handwriting, and another document folded behind it. Her vision blurred as she began to read. "Mia," it said, "thank you. For your kindness, your patience, and your heart. For seeing me when the world no longer did. You gave me something no medicine could, hope. You reminded me that kindness is still alive in this world. I have no family left who cares to remember me, but I do not leave this life alone. You became the daughter I always wished for. Please accept my home. It's small, but it's yours now. Along with it, a small savings account I've left behind. Use it to care for your mother and to follow your dreams. You once told me you wanted to heal others. I believe you will. Thank you for being my friend. With love, Herbert Harris. By the time she reached the last line, tears blurred the ink. The lawyers waited in respectful silence. The second document confirmed it, a deed transferring ownership of his house to her name. He said you were the only one who treated him like family, one of them added quietly. The words hit her like a wave she couldn't swim through. Around her, the diner had fallen into stunned silence. No one moved. Even the coffee pot hissed quietly, as though afraid to intrude. Mia stood behind the counter, the letter pressed to her chest, tears falling freely as the rain outside deepened. That evening, after her shift, she walked to the address written in the letter. The house sat at the edge of town, surrounded by tall oak trees and a white fence that had seen better days. The porch creaked beneath her shoes as she turned the key that fit perfectly into the lock. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old wood, of time standing still. Books lined the walls. Photographs of smiling faces filled the mantel. In the study, sunlight filtered through lace curtains onto a desk cluttered with papers. And there, among them, was a small framed photograph of her and Mr. Harris laughing in the diner the morning she'd spilled coffee and he'd told her it was the best thing that had happened all week. He had framed it. The sight of it broke her. She sank into the chair, holding the picture to her chest, and wept not just for his death, but for the quiet love that had grown between two lonely souls who had found each other by chance. When the tears finally subsided, she lit a candle by the window. The flame flickered softly, reflecting in the glass like a promise. Outside, the rain eased into mist, the world holding its breath. "Thank you," she whispered into the stillness. "For everything." The words hung in the air, tender and certain. That night, she stayed in the house, his house, now hers, falling asleep surrounded by his books and his memories, comforted by the thought that maybe, somewhere, he was at peace. Weeks passed, and the diner slowly returned to normal, though nothing truly felt the same. Mia still worked the morning shift, still wore the same faded uniform, still brewed the first pot of coffee before sunrise. But now, at 8:10 every morning, she poured an extra cup, black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and placed it on the table by the window. The regulars noticed. They spoke softer now, smiled more. Someone had framed a small note she'd written beneath a photograph of Mr. Harris. "In loving memory of Herbert Harris, who reminded us that kindness never goes unnoticed." The cup always stayed full, untouched, steam curling upward like a prayer. But sometimes, when the light hit the glass just right, Mia swore she could see the faint outline of an old man in a gray coat, watching the rain with a quiet smile. Life didn't become suddenly easy after that, but it became gentler. Her mother's health improved, the bills slowly disappeared, and she finally enrolled full-time in nursing school. She worked nights and studied through exhaustion, but every time she felt like giving up, she thought of Mr. Harris's letter, the shaky handwriting, the belief in her she hadn't found in herself. It gave her courage, and as the years went by, she kept her promise, to live kindly, to help others, to make sure that no one felt invisible the way he once had. On the anniversary of his passing, she returned to the house. The oaks outside swayed softly in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets to the air. She sat by the same window he once loved, a cup of coffee warming her hands. The photo of the two of them still sat on the desk, the candle beside it flickering faintly. "You were right," she said quietly, smiling through tears. "Kindness doesn't die." Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, familiar. Clearwater looked much the same as it always had, but for Mia, everything had changed. The diner still opened at dawn, the neon sign still buzzed faintly in the mist, and life went on as it always did. Yet somewhere in the quiet rhythm of that small town, the memory of a teacher and a waitress lingered, proof that even the smallest kindness can ripple outward, touching lives long after the giver is gone. And every morning, at 8:10 sharp, Mia still set down that single cup of coffee by the window, letting its steam rise toward the light, an offering, a promise, and a thank you to the man who taught her that love, once given, never truly leaves.